the promise of this series that each guest have a personal life as interesting or more so than what we see in the ring. I don't know if that's the case, but I think for the first time we have a guest whose personal life and personal existence is very much like what we have seen in the ring. It's Jim Cornette. I tell people when they ask me if you really like this, hi, it's been a long time, which we'll get to. I say to people, yes, I have no doubt that Stacy is occasionally treated to a promo being cut on the remote control that can't be found. Motherfucking remote fell on the goddamn couch again, son of a bitch.
Where is this fucking thing? Right. Is here a minute? I can't work this goddamn. When I try to answer her phone, she's got one of the phones that like everybody else has, and I hate that shit. I can't answer the phone. I'm like, what the fuck? You know.
And we started with a laugh. Who would have thought 2 years ago that we'd be here?
Well, you caught me at a cranky moment anyway, Sean.
I liked you so much until one day when we booked Vince Russo for a live U-Shoot. U-Shoot's a show where we have the more salacious characters in the business, certainly lightning rods that would elicit a very passionate response from the public. You were on twice, the only guest to ever be on twice. And the stakes are raised because it was a live show. So we really have to go for somebody that people not only want to watch.
You got to go for two dogs fucking on the side of the road.
Yeah. And so we booked Vince Russo. You were upset initially that a company that you were close to, at the time we were, I think, in some kind of exclusive relationship. And you
we were seeing other people, but still we had,
you were doing podcasts and stuff, but the hardcore video stuff you were doing with us. But so initially you were disappointed that we did it, and you said,
Well, no, that's actually incorrect. I was disappointed that you did it, but initially, you know what the problem? Let's bring it all out here. The problem was, and stop me when I misrepresent, tell a lie, or in other way miscategorize this thing. You had sent me an email, and I got it at home, and it said, we're doing a U-Shoot with Vince Russo, and it wouldn't be a U-Shoot with Vince Russo without a question or a comment or something from Jim Cornette. I forget how you phrased it. And I was actually on my way to Baltimore to do a Ring of Honor taping, so I wrote you back a quick email saying there's no way in fucking hell that I will be a part of any way, that shape, or form this guy's going to make a dime out of the wrestling business. But I'm on the way to Baltimore. I'm going to be gone for a week. When I come back, we'll talk on the phone.
We talked after I got the email, and I said, come on, you got it? And you said, well, all right, we'll talk. I got TVs. It's 4 days. I'll be back.
Exactly, which I never at any point acted like I was going to do it. But I said, we'll talk at length because I'm rushed. When I went to Baltimore,
I knew some fucking kid came up to you with a computer, right?
No, actually, I even had a laptop then. I had to have a laptop that I figured out enough of how to work enough to answer emails, because I was up there for a week and they would send stuff out and I had to send stuff for, Sinclair. So I look and I see there's a trailer for the aforementioned U-Shoot. And I click on it, of course, out of morbid curiosity, want to see the two dogs fucking on the side of the road. And by the way, you bought me breakfast, and I don't know how long it's been since those eggs were up that chicken's ass, but it's been a while, so I'm a little bubbly. But anyway, the trailer was done in such a way as Russo, you were saying, well, there could be guest stars and there could be any questions and there could be things happening.
Can I give you the quote so that we can work with that?
Give me the quote. Give me the quote.
The trailer that you mentioned was a little infomercial interview, 5-7 minutes for the thing.
Right.
Which, of course, being steeped in television production, must have been shot long before we talked the day before.
The day before,
okay.
Yeah.
And I didn't review with Vince the answers to the questions, because I wanted it to look like a real interview like this.
Right.
And one of the questions was, is there anybody that you expect to hear from in the business?
Yes.
Period, or question mark, I should
say.
I was expecting, I might have been expecting Hogan's name, Nash's name, people's names, Eric's name, certainly. Him to say something about somebody. You are the only person he mentioned.
And he didn't mention about anybody. He said, well,
guy with a tennis racket.
There's this guy from the South that carries a tennis racket. In other words, now I'm hot because in his own babbling, incoherent way, he has basically promised people that I'm going to have some involvement on, him continuing
I don't know that he promised anybody anything.
To rape and fuck the business. The point is, and plus I was in a cranky mood because I'm in Baltimore for a week, away from home, dealing with all kinds of stress and etc. And I said, son of a bitch, Sean Oliver, my old friend, is following the principle of better to ask for forgiveness than permission, and he has taped this thing and shot this thing and released this thing and then written me and asked me, would I be a part of it? And so I responded, possibly in an overreaction, because we've never had any problems and we've since made up. But I issued a statement saying that I wasn't going to be a part of it. Don't anybody buy this fucking thing expecting me to be a part of it. Don't contribute to Vince Russo raping the business.
Contributed to the company.
Well, but it's not my fault you chose to book fucking Saddam Hussein or Osama bin Laden or whatever the fuck. But I said don't.
And if Mike Douglas had an interview with Saddam Hussein, you wouldn't tune in and watch, would you?
No, because Mike Douglas is dead. But so it'd be a boring interview.
Did I just date myself?
Yeah,
like I
he
can't
certainly
even believe?
did. Yeah, Mike Douglas.
Holy
You
fuck.
couldn't even say Jimmy Kimmel, Jay Leno.
Cooper.
People think that I'm behind the times, folks, and he's talking about Mike Douglas.
Well, Saddam Hussein is dead also. Anderson Cooper has him on. You wouldn't watch,
well,
of
but
course.
anyway, that's the
Bad
problem.
TV
is that
decision to book
I
Saddam Hussein.
put out the fucking statement. Don't help Vince Russo make another 2 cents out of a business that he has sodomized and raped and fucking put the boots to for so long. Don't do this, and especially don't expect me to be a part of it.
And that's the only thing.
And I was offended that I thought that you were in on trying to lead people to believe that I was going to be part of the thing because that I have no principles like other people in the business, and for a payoff will do something that I totally disdain for doing.
Because there's no way you could have thought that I could have shot that after you told me no.
No, I knew you shot it beforehand. That's what I'm saying. You asked for forgiveness instead of permission. You shot it and put it out there, and then called me and asked me
your name, and I said, "Well, I better talk to Jim here."
Well, you didn't have to put it on the air.
Sure, I did.
I wonder if this is what they're going through now on Capitol Hill, trying to, just two sides that. But I love you, Sean, and we've made up, and I apologize.
There's so much more we have to talk about.
Now, see, I stick my hand out here, and don't leave me hanging, brother.
You referenced the Hatfields and the McCoys. When we finally got to talk about this, the email, you referenced the Hatfields and the McCoys. I think the series might have been on TV at the time.
Yes, it was. I was a big fan, actually.
Yeah, you were over the top with the as you are. And my statements, when people would ask me, which you also took issue with, was that I expect no response other than this. It's why we work together. It's why he's entertaining, and he's 100% the real article. So I don't care what he says. I love him the way he is and accept him for what he is. To which you replied, I am the retarded uncle at the barbecue.
At the barbecue or at Christmas where they did, it's Uncle Joe and he's that way.
You were the retarded uncle a little bit because you didn't talk to me about it. I texted Stacy, I tried to talk to you. I said, have your nutbag call me because this is a 2-minute conversation. And the conversation was, Jim, how can I, as a producer of programming, not put Vince Russo on to have the public ask him, why did you do this? Why did you do that?
But then I likened it to child porn because there's some things you just can't do. Well, so should Vince Russo should be.
If you likened it to Geraldo having Charlie Manson on, I could buy that.
No, actually, that was interesting.
But the child.
You could learn things from Charlie Manson, even if it's what not to do. You can't really learn anything from Vince Russo. But let's not spend the whole. We're going to talk so much. Let's not spend the whole thing on him. But I do apologize because I had so many other people making me mad at that time that I was already mad to begin with, and then I get this, and it's my hot button, and also my good friend has gone around behind my back and blah blah blah.
Did you watch the show?
No. Are you kidding? No.
All right.
That's why, and people ask me, I had never before I went to work for TNA Wrestling. When I started with TNA, I had seen the first TNA television program 4 weeks before that I'd ever seen before in my life, because when they started, Russo was with them, and I just got in the habit of not watching it because why should I make myself mad in my own home? And so after he was gone and I'd made the deal with Dutch and everything, I said, shit, I better watch this show because I've never seen it because, I can't hear that voice. Can't look at that face.
He's become your arch nemesis. You're a comic book collector. This is almost like the give me. I don't know this stuff. Give me an arch nemesis, like Superman and Lex Luthor.
Well, Lex Luthor was intelligent and was was like really like an equal of a super villain that was of equal powers in some ways, but no.
It's become mythic. The heat that at this point, I don't even really know what it stems from. And I have to say this, and this is just my personal thing. I don't believe that it could really stem from this passionate issue you have, it can't stem from what he's done to the wrestling business. It
Oh,
can't
yes.
just stem from what he's done to
Why
a
couldn't
business
it?
you love.
Why
It's
couldn't
too
it?
personal.
Yes,
You could
it's-
look at it and go, "Oh, this fucking, I'm not even going to watch
Well,
that."
but
Is
see-
that the hatred? The I'm going to choke him in his sleep.
Now they say I
whatever.
won't let people talk. Here's one of the things, since I've been away from wrestling and for the past year and have somewhat come to a level of sanity. Yes, it is all from wrestling, but that's my problem. Wrestling was my life. Wrestling was what I enjoyed doing. I was a wrestling fan. I've considered myself lucky. Everything I got to do in wrestling, every time I made an advancement, wow! It wasn't about the money. It wasn't about a career. It was about the wrestling business. When I was working full time in wrestling on the road every day, if I had a couple of days off, I caught up on the wrestling tapes of all the territories that I would get tapes of that I wouldn't get a chance to watch. And he came to symbolize, besides the fact that he was just naturally annoying, because we couldn't be more polar opposites. I've said this before, if one of us was a black lesbian nun with, a paraplegic, we couldn't be more polar opposite, but it was about wrestling, because wrestling to me was, oh God, now we're going on and on.
No,
about
I don't
Vince
want you to
Russo
go back
again,
to the other stuff. What I
but
want you to
but that's
address
the
is-
thing is not only what he's done to me, not only that he's a backstabbing prick, but also what he's done to other people, what he's done to the business, the bad gimmicks he's given that's ruined potentially good talents' careers, the bad writing that he's done that's ruined, promotions' chances of advancement to possibly compete with Vince. The stupid shit that he did when he was with Vince, that he takes credit for, the big boom period, when there's Steve Austin and The Rock and a network quality production facility and Jim Ross, the best announcer in the history of wrestling, and all of these tools that he had at his disposal, and he was writing fucking midgets and people painted fucking colors and everything, and takes credit for the big, it just, the whole thing.
But
the whole thing.
But we can't, on the one hand, say, McMahon was the one that was taking all these ideas and put them on TV, and then say that Russo's stuff was able to just hit TV untouched, unedited, unchecked. So is Vince McMahon McMahon as much to blame for this as Vince Russo?
Not as much, because when his shit hit the air unchecked, that's when WCW went out of business. That's what happened when it hit the air unchecked. Vince McMahon, it was the two dogs fucking on the side of the road principle. People had never been allowed to do this before in the wrestling business, and wrestling fans had never seen this before. So naturally, they're going to watch it for a short period of time. But as we've seen, like Sarah Palin would say, how'd that work out for you? They went from 10 million people to 3 million people, because once you do all that shit, you can't top it, and there's no rules, and anarchy reigns, and it's chaos everywhere, and you desensitize people to everything. And now, it was the ECW principle, only instead of violence, it was fucking trash TV and crash TV and stupidity. And Russo and that idiot Ferrara actually admitted that they would sit and watch Jerry Springer all day long and figure out how to write wrestling like Jerry Springer, and for the lowest common denominator of trashy people who wanted to see people yelling and screaming at each other with no purpose all the time. And it just, but Russo and I, on a personal basis, we actually at first got along until I realized that he didn't want to learn about wrestling. He thought he knew what wrestling was and was going to do that regardless. We coexisted with each other. We wouldn't, go to each other's house for Christmas or whatever, because he's from New York and I'm from the South, and he's annoying and I'm not. And but at the same time, we didn't have hatred until it just repeatedly having to sit in the same room with him and listen to what he wanted to do with wrestling, and seeing what he was doing with wrestling, and seeing how he talked to guys, and seeing what the shit that he put on paper. And it was.
You did that in the WWF with him.
Yes.
And but then things were okay again a little bit when you were reunited in TNA. Is this safe to say?
Well,
I did an interview with you. I think it was your first guest booker, and I brought up Russo in a joking way. And you said, "No, me and Vinny Rue are good now. Don't start anything."
Actually, we were good because we weren't yelling at each other, and I was trying for once not to be the Jim Cornette that goes off and rants and raves, and I was trying to be a good boy, and that didn't work either. So I just started going back to being my original self. But no, we didn't yell and scream at each other, but it was embarrassing to sit in the production meetings, especially with the representative of Spike, Scott Fishman. we'd have the Spike representative in all the TNA production meetings, and it was embarrassing because I knew he was going back to their real program, the UFC, and saying, yeah, that fucking wrestling, and the guy that writes it can't even spell, the words on the format are misspelled, and you have this horseshit silliness that they do. And, you know, it was embarrassing. And that's why I went to TNA. He was not there yet. They hired him 6 weeks afterwards. And I've told the story before, and then I gave him a notice. You know, I told Jeff, I said, this would get in the way of business. I don't know what the fuck you're thinking, but it would get in the way of business. Don't want to be around him. Obviously, you know, let me finish up, let Abyss give me the black hole slam, injure me, get some heat on your heel. I was figuring at the time, you know, 3 or 4 months later, sometimes somebody would come to their senses, he'd be gone, and I'd go back. Because they had asked me to come to begin with. I didn't call them. Dutch had been calling me for months.
Why'd they ask Vince Russo to come in? Somebody saw
I don't
value in
fucking
him?
know. Jeff, that's the thing. Jeff, my old friend, I like Jeff Jarrett. I've never had a problem with Jeff Jarrett. His grandmother got me started in the business. She became one of my mother's best friends. His father started me as a professional in the business. I learned a ton from him. He's one of the great booking minds in the history of wrestling. Jeff, a great wrestler, great talent, grew up in that family. I have likened it before to people that I otherwise admire and respect, that are intelligent, and there's nothing wrong with them except they believe in God. They believe in this supernatural supreme being, the invisible man in the sky. They buy that whole thing, but otherwise they're normal people who you would think are sane, rational, or intelligent. Jeff Jarrett has a blind spot. He found out what good it did him in the end, and I love you, Jeff, to this day, except you not only hired Vince Russo to be involved in your company, and chose his advice over your father's, but you also, in the process, made me have to sit and coexist with him for 3 years. And I regret that to this day.
Vince Russo doesn't dislike you in the least.
Well, no, he doesn't to anybody's face because he's the baby face. Why does he keep burying me behind my back? When Dixie lied to me, when they let me go, I was going to ask for a raise, by the way, because I was doing so much more work. And Jeff brought me in to be I don't even know what they ever called me, management director, wrestling czar,
creative director,
something with management. And then they hire Russo, and then I give my notice, and Jeff won't take it. He said, if you don't come, that means you're no-showing. All right. So we didn't speak for a while. Then he asked me to become an agent. And then somehow I figured, okay, maybe if I work as hard as I can somehow counterbalance the detriment that Russo's going to be to the business by doing something good for TNA. And maybe then if I do real good and he does what he normally does, then it can balance out where it'll at least be the same as it was. Tried that for a while. That obviously wasn't working because you can't overcome that level of badness, no matter who you are. Then it was like, well, now, it's a check for doing very little, but I hated it. I hated going down there. I would count the hours. I would be talking to Stacy on the phone, going 42 hours, and I get to get back in the car and get out of this fucking place. And then there became the resignation of, not resignation of resigning my job, but resignation of, well, it's just always going to be this way, and they pretty much probably lost their chance to make a first impression anyway, so I'll just coexist. And then finally, when they sent Jeff home, for that issue that he had with, not telling Dixie the truth about his relationship with Karen Angle. Then Jeff calls me on the phone, and basically over the course of the conversation, I'm not going to quote it exactly, but says, take care of the company for me. He'll go too far, try to keep, because the boys hated most of the time, when you would come up and present what he wanted to do because it didn't make any sense. And then they would say, well, this doesn't make any sense. And I would say, I can't argue with you, so let's figure out some way to get to the same place we need to get to and take a different road. And then I'd have to go back to Jeff. And he'd say, okay, do that. Well, now Jeff was gone. He calls me up on the phone, says, take care of the business. Don't let him go too far. Keep the boys in line. Because then they fired Dutch, who was the only other person that the boys would listen to. Some of them wouldn't even listen to me, but most of them would.
Why did Dutch get fired?
Because he was Jeff's guy. See, once that they sent Jeff home and Jeff wasn't around every day, that's where Russo, the one talent that Russo has is being able to convince people that don't know anything about what he's talking about that he's good at what he does.
So he pointedly convinces Dixie that she doesn't need Dutch.
Well, of course, because why else would they fire Dutch after he'd been there since the beginning of the company and had done nothing wrong? Once Jeff was gone, then Dutch was gone, then Savio Vega was gone because Dutch had brought Savio in to be an agent. Rudy Charles was gone because that was, Jeff's referee from way back. And actually, I was the last one left. And Dutch actually had told me that he was talking to Jeff on the phone. Well, how long will it be before they get Cornette, or Cornette fucking flips one or the other? And then at that point, and Terry Taylor, of course, was the talent relations vice president or whatever. So anyway, Jeff has called me and said, try to take care of it. Don't let him go too far. Keep it, checks and balances, right, like we're supposed to have in the government. Okay, so out of the duty that I felt to the company, the team was in need, actually go to Vince Russo for the first time. I mean, we'd said hello in production meetings for a couple of years. Hey, Vince, hey, man, blah, blah, blah. Maybe even the, meaningless handshake. But we'd never actually had a substantive conversation about anything that didn't relate to what we were doing on the show that day. And I went to him, I said, look, we know we've had the history and we have no similar thoughts about professional wrestling whatsoever, but I will help you. The team is in need. Our fearless leader is at home. The boys, it could be anarchy. I will help you. We shook hands, right? Let's put our shit aside. And then the following taping was the whole kerfluffle with the Sting and Hernandez match and Eric Young and et cetera, et cetera. And I'll tell you this story, and hopefully I haven't told it in too much detail on any other videos that I might have done, but it's probably be more entertaining here. The last taping that I was at with TNA, they were sending me the formats at home, so fax, so I could look at them, or email, whatever, so I could look at them. And Bozo had booked a match between Sting and Hernandez. Sting is a babyface icon. Hernandez was the Hispanic superhero babyface that Dixie really was into and wanted to make a project out of, so I had taken to personally agenting all of his matches since he had never been pushed as a single. He was always in a tag team. He was in a new role now. There were some things he didn't know, and I wanted to make sure that he had the best chance possible to get over. So I would literally, on his run-ins, and so when he would clean the house, I would literally choreograph everything. So he was throwing this guy somewhere and boosting that guy over the top rope and doing this and blah, blah, blah. And it looked like Super Mex. And I said, Hernandez versus Sting, it's a babyface match, and then he had some run-ins with heels, and they were both going to fight the heels off, but then some way or another, Sting was actually going to roll. Oh, and Sting had broken ribs from some angle previously in the show. So here's legitimately a 51-year-old man at that time with broken ribs against a guy, 20 years younger than he is, 80 pounds heavier than he is, supposed to be the strongest man in the world. They're both baby faces. And Sting's going to roll him up from behind, and then Eric Young is going to come and hit the ring with a baseball bat and lay them both out and stand over him and cut a promo. Oh my God, my head blew up. And these two guys are featured in main event matches on the pay-per-view coming up, which Eric Young might not even have been on the card on the pay-per-view, but he certainly wasn't in the main event. So I talked to Russo for the first and only time on the phone in the 3 years that we worked together on my way down to Florida. In the car, on a cell phone. I said, Vince, this ain't going to work for a variety of reasons. The run-ins are going to be ill-timed. It's going to make one or both of these guys look bad. Eric Young is a great athlete, and he's a great guy, and he's been around because everybody loves him, but he's six weeks ago, he was falling down when his pyro goes off. He was a comedy guy. Actually fell down when his pyro went off every single entrance. You would have thought that pretty soon even an eggplant could have figured this out, right? I said, now you put a suit on him, and in a month you want him to wipe out the two guys in two of the main events on the pay-per-view and stand over him and cut a prayer. It's going to kill everybody. I said, look, let's do something different. You've got to have the match, because he had backed it into a corner as usual. See, it's harder to finish somebody else's murder mystery. Earl Stanley Gardner wrote all the Perry Masons, right? How about it? You're Earl Stanley Gardner. You write the first chapter, and then you hand it to me, and I'll finish it. Well, who did it? I don't fucking know. It's your fucking.
You shook my hand and said, Captain's at home.
Yes.
I'm on the team.
Yes.
I'll do what you want.
Well, no, I said I'll help you. I didn't say I'll do what you want.
So
I
you
said
saw
I'll
this
help
as
you.
help. Okay, cool.
You listen. Let's listen to each other. And Terry Taylor also. Hey, in the production meetings, whatever we want to say, it's us. But we're going to hash it out. But when we go out there, united front in front of the talent. I'm all with that too, right? So anyway, on the phone, we agreed, okay, let's change this up. Let's do a DQ. I don't like having DQs. And also, me and Vince in the WWF one time had a big DQ argument because On a Raw show in 1998, out of 8 matches, there were 6 DQs. And then fucking Helmsley was fucking China at the time and got mad because of her match and changed it to a DQ. So I go up to Vince and I'm like, Vince, we got 8 matches, 7 are DQs. He, DQ, schmeq, nobody cares in front of all the boys, and everybody walks off from me. Like I'm, fucking some job guy. I say, okay, you're going to care, motherfucker, when you're back running a video store in 4 years or 3 years. And I was off by a year.
Oh, this is Vince, you said Vince said
Yeah, Vince Russo. Yeah,
Okay.
Vince Russo. So then Russo goes to Vince McMahon and says, Cornette yelled at me in front of the boys. Vince McMahon goes to Jim Ross. Cornette is yelling at Vince Russo. JR comes to me, find out why I yelled at him. Then goes back to Vince McMahon and said, well, yeah, you yelled at him, but here's why, because he blah, blah, blah. Anyway, we, for the sake of this, let's get out of this match because it's a tournament match. He's got to win, whatever the fuck. It's too late to rewrite the whole show. You shouldn't have the match to begin with, but since we've got it, let's do this. Let's lighten up on the run-in. Let's have him fight off whatever heel. Then let's do a DQ of some description because of this and get your result and get out of this match without hurting anybody and killing anybody's career. And Eric Young can live to get over another day some other way.
And he said,
yes. Okay. And when I get to Florida and the next day come to the studio and get in a production meeting, they've not only changed it back to what he originally had, they've made it more complicated. There's going to be run-ins in several stages, and still the guy's going to roll the guy from behind, even though he's a baby face, and look like and still you got a 50-year-old man with broken ribs beating Supermax, and here comes Eric Young with a baseball bat. He's going to lay everybody out. He's going to cut the promo. I said, what the fuck did we just have this conversation for? And then Taz even spoke up. Well, we didn't want to have a DQ. I said, I don't want to have the fucking match. I said, but we can't do this to all these guys. This is going to be a mess. And in the production meeting, we hashed it out, and Terry Taylor was there, and Keith Mitchell, the producer, and I think Dave Sahadi, the director, and Vince Russo, and the other agents at the time. And okay, we decided let's go with. I presented my case rather forcefully, but without yelling and screaming. I didn't motherfuck anybody. Didn't you goddamn idiot? You did this. I didn't do that. I said, what the fuck are we trying to do here? We're going to fucking bury these guys, and it's going to look like shit, and let's go back to what you and I talked about on the phone and agreed to 2 days ago, Vince. Okay. So that's what I laid out, and that's what we did.
So 2 times he said yes.
Yeah, along with everybody else in the room. And we hashed it out in the production meeting, like Terry said, and then we went and had a united front, and I laid the stuff out. And then it was right before coming up on the next taping, 2 weeks later, and I'm thinking, okay, now I originally agreed for the same money and the same trans to be an agent and an on-camera commissioner or whatever. But now the production crew, Keith Mitchell and Dave Sahadi, had asked for me to be the only agent in the truck because Savio Vega was a good wrestling agent, but his accent was so thick when it's live and it's coming up, shoot him, they don't know what the fuck, who's him? They didn't know they couldn't understand Savio. Brian Armstrong, who I love and respect, and the Armstrong family was having some of his issues that he's spoken about at the time, and it was not as effective an agent as he could have been at that time, even though he's tremendous talent, a great family. And so they asked for me to be, so not only did I have to agent my matches, and I've asked for and was mostly taken off being on camera because then I didn't have to wear a suit in that oppressive Florida heat and run from the truck into the ring and make a ruling and then come back. At one time I was back there, I was wearing a suit. I had 2 segments in a row and they start reversing the order of the segments, and I had to scream at everybody in the back. I said, God damn it. Somebody tell the truck that Jim Cornette said we ain't doing a goddamn thing until somebody can give me a straight answer on which segment is coming up next. So I know what the fuck I'm doing. And we paused and everybody, okay, we're doing this one. All right, thank you. We went out and did. But I'm running back and forth in 100-degree heat wearing a suit and I'm agenting and I'm cutting promos. So they took me off camera and good. And but anyway, they asked me to be the only agent in the truck, so I had to agent my matches, which were generally the main events, because since I had more experience, that's what I got was the main TV main events and the more important matches. I also had to get with all the other agents and get their matches, the finishes, the important points. Do we need to see somebody pull out an object? Do we need to see somebody's facial expression? Is there going to be a run-in, a crazy dive out of nowhere?
So you're in the truck, and just for anyone who's not experienced with production, you've got everything that's going on. And yes, Eric Young's going to pull. So you're telling the director you're going to have to get tight on the ring because he's coming out right here with an object.
Yeah.
So make sure you get
watch Sean. Sean's going to dive on the other side. Don't miss Sean.
Right. Okay.
Here comes a finish is coming up. Don't miss that. Boom. Cue the music. Boom. Cue the blah blah blah. Bell. Ding ding.
Got it.
Whatever. So all the matches, all night, right? I'm doing this. The only thing I didn't do was the live interviews, since Mr. Russo refused to have anything to do with anything physical. He wouldn't agent the matches. He wouldn't agent the angles. He would just agent the interviews, because that was his, verbal effluvia spewing forth. But he said, oh, but the matches, the physical stuff, that's up to you guys. Then why are you writing a fucking wrestling show, idiot? If you don't want to have, don't know anything, you're admitting you don't know anything about the matches and don't have anything to do with the matches and the finishes, why are you writing the show?
But that's a token of respect in a way, right?
No, it's a token of I'm admitting I don't know what the fuck I'm doing. I shouldn't be writing a wrestling show if you don't know anything about the matches and the finishes and can't tell the guys how to do this shit.
But he's writing the interpersonal angles and you guys are handling the physicality.
Yeah, basically we're taking his shit and try to make sense out of it. There was a time I actually had to agent, and I took this as a personal challenge, and I accomplished it. I had to agent a 32-man brawl taking place in 4 different locations in the impact zone. And the director is like, how are we going to shoot this? Do we have enough cameras? Do we have enough lights? And everybody's going, what the fuck? And so I got everybody, it took hours, and I laid out everything, and they shot it. And it wasn't even the go off the air angle. It was the top of the hour. Then they came back and had another hour of people screaming and yelling at each other. But anyway,
so you're in the truck. You're in the truck.
So anyway, so after that taping, see, I knew this wasn't going to be linear, but after that taping, I'll tell this and then let's move on. After that taping, I figured, okay, I'm agenting now my matches, plus I'm the only agent in the truck except for the interviews where Russo will come in and stare at him and leave. I'm still on camera every once in a while. Jeff has asked me to take care of his fucking company. My contract is coming up in a couple months. I'm going to ask for a little bit more money for this for the first time in 3 years. So Terry Taylor calls me on the phone and says, I said, hey, TT. And he said, well, I got bad news. I said, well, I thought somebody, died or something. He said, we got to let you go. I said, well, I was about to call and ask for a raise. I guess we're really far apart, aren't we? Right? And he says, well, they think you're not 100% behind creative. I said, how is this a news bulletin? I said, that would mean I'd be 100% behind Russo. That's not, but I told you, even saw, I was going to have him in the meeting.
Who's they when he said, who's they to be understood to be?
Continued. Let me just take this ride with me. I said, I was going to have you in the meeting where I shook Russo's hand, but you weren't there when we were about to do it before the production meeting, so we did it, and he came around the corner and said, was I supposed to be in this meeting? I said, no, we've already shook hands, we're fine, we're good, right? I said, I told the guy to help him. The team is in need. Jeff has asked me to help. How the fuck am I any less behind creative than I was before? And I'm starting to think. He said, well, they just don't think, I said, who's they? Well, Dixie, I said, well, why don't you tell Dixie to call me then? So the next day, Dixie calls me with Terry on the phone. Known Terry for 30 years. Terry knows wrestling. He's Christian buddies with Russo. That's why, I figured there's something going on there. Because they both have that thing going on in their heads. But I said, Dixie, well, we just don't believe you're 100%. If you can't be 100%, we want to hit a home run and we're swinging for the fences. And if you don't truly believe in it, then you can't do your best. I said, I can't do my best job. I said, I drive from fucking Louisville. I'm never late. I'm the first one there. I'm one of the last ones to leave. Dutch rides with me. Both of us were one of the last ones to leave. I've never no-showed, never shown up in the condition not to perform. Always done my best, sweated my fucking ass off. You think I'm not 100% behind this shit? That was insulting that she would think that I would do less than my best just because I think that the guy writing the show is an idiot. No, I had to do better than my best to make up for the fact that the guy writing the show is an idiot. And I said, so basically, Russo has said that I'm fucking with his shit and you need to, oh no, this has nothing to do with Vince. Please, seriously? And she expected me to believe this. So anyway, I said, all right, Dixie, I guess we're going to agree to disagree then. Thank you very much, and I'll see you down the road or whatever, in the funny papers, whatever the fuck. We left it on it that I wasn't going to knock them, and they weren't going to knock me, and everybody's happy, and, I disbelief at that point. But then the next day, I read on the internet from The Sun in England, Jim Cornette, dismissed from TNA, do you remember this, for blowing up and screaming at Vince Russo and acting unprofessionally, and why are you pushing Eric Young, and all this other stuff that was in the production meeting that was supposed to be it. Yeah. Only it didn't happen that way. As I called Terry Taylor, I said, what the fuck is this? Well, yeah, we've got a leak somewhere, and I wish I knew where. I said, "A leak, Terry? Jesus Christ, you were in the meeting. A, this shit didn't happen. I didn't scream at him. B, I didn't go into business for myself. You guys said, okay, we'll change it." You know what he said? This is his exact quote of what he said to me. "Jim, it's just that you're so aggressive sometimes, people don't want to agree with you or don't want to disagree with you." I said, "But you still agreed with me. I didn't go into business for myself. I didn't change anything. I didn't scream at anybody. I didn't motherfuck anybody." And we went on, and now he's had the chance to go in and say, because what happened was, Russo, with nobody else to talk to Dixie that had any sense, was able to tell her, "Cornette's changing my shit. If only my, brilliant thoughts were be able to hit the screen uncompromised, then we'd be in better shape than we are now, which is up shit creek without a fucking paddle. And I need somebody that'll help me instead of somebody that'll detract." So here comes Ed Ferrara 3 days later, right? But anyway, at the time I didn't even know about Ferrara. I would have put it all together. But I said, "Terry," I said, "I want a retraction." "Well, I'll talk to Dixie. I'm sure she'll have no problem with that, telling these people that know that this didn't happen," right? So the next day on the internet, where it had said an unnamed TNA source said that Jim Cornette was fired for screaming at Vince Russo and "Why are you pushing Eric Young?" Next day, unnamed TNA source says, "No, it didn't happen." She wouldn't put her name on it. And he sends me an email, says, "Is this what you wanted?" I said, "No, that's not what I wanted." The fucking douchebag won't even put her name on a goddamn retraction that you said she'd have no problem giving. Okay, we're done with Russo. Done with it.
Admit that despite ratings or making a mockery of the business, or put aside personal stuff like the JR and the Oklahoma. JR's a friend of yours. I understand losing your cool over that. You've got an anger issue.
Oh, yeah.
There's a way to deal with stuff, and listen, I don't know that I could sit on Capitol Hill now and reach across and not try to strangle Cruz over the shutdown.
No,
so
they actually
that's why
they make me as angry as Russo does, because this is real life affecting everybody,
Right.
not just wrestling, and me and everybody else. And these fucking Republican pricks can't get over the fact the black guy won, and we don't live and leave it to Beaverland
Right.
anymore. And they're going to ruin the economy to hold up for God and freedom of country. They want to. They want to they want to preserve everybody's freedoms as long as you're not gay or black or Hispanic or a woman or an atheist or anybody else except a rich white Republican cocksucker. Yeah.
So
that's the freedom.
So my point was, fortunately, I'm able to sleep at night knowing I have people like-minded to myself who are up there doing this in a diplomatic way, or overseas in Iran, doing this diplomatically, because I don't know that I always be able to. So I know my limitations.
Yes.
So I need to stay out of positions and situations that would get me that way. I'm not going to be elected to office, clearly. Isn't your passion and anger an ill fit for someone who's in a booking position or any position otherwise where it's a big personality game? You've got to assuage feelings. Maybe you've got to assuage. Maybe you've got to, if the tomatoes mine. You've got to come down a little more forceful on this guy because he responds. You're the coach. This guy gets 10 extra push-ups when I lean on him. This guy, I gotta stroke him a little bit. Are you ill-equipped to do that?
No, actually, no. And truthfully, except for wrestling school students, I've yelled at on a number of occasions because Bill Watts did the same thing to us, and that's how I learned. And Dusty wasn't particularly that fucking goddamn diplomatic. He might be diplomatic to Ric Flair of the Four Horsemen. He wasn't diplomatic to fucking George South or Cougar J. And that's the way things are. But that's exactly why I quit the wrestling business, because I finally came to the realization that I was fighting a losing battle. And the problem I've got more than anger management, because people that know me well and spend a lot of time around me know that I try to avoid at all costs. I try to avoid confrontation. I try to be unnoticed. I don't want to be the center of attention. When I go to the store, I want to be as unnoticed as possible. When I go to dinner, I want to be over in the corner and I don't want to have any interaction with people.
Go through the drive-through at Dairy Queen.
Whatever the case may be, I go out of my way not to be confrontational and not to have words with people, and not because I know that sooner or later it will get ugly. And so I try to be as nice as I can, as long as I can. I'm always polite. I'm never the first one to fucking be rude, even to a cashier or whoever the fuck. Because sooner or later, if I have to stay in that position, there's going to come a time where I'm going to blow up because I've had all I can stands, I can't stands no more, and it's Popeye. And so that's why I try to be as nice and friendly as I can to everybody until they just make it impossible for me to do so. And then I go completely from 0 to 60, and I've had all I can stands, I can't stands no more. And, you know, my mother's family tended to have, they were the ones that had the anger issues in the family. And maybe I inherited that, but at the same time, she was the most polite woman that you could ever meet. And she was right from wrong. She would have never stolen anything. She would have never talked bad about anyone, especially didn't deserve it. She, you know, blah, blah, blah. But if you presented her with rudeness, stupidity, or coughing when we're trying to talk, then I've seen her also run people off property at gunpoint. The guy whose dog killed my dog when I was 5 years old, and he was trying to get out of it. And she said, well, you get rid of that fucking dog in a week, Herb Lewis, or elsewise I will. And she took her .22 rifle out from behind her back, and he took off, and that dog was gone.
Is this hard on Stacy?
Yeah, she's
catching all the shrapnel when you come home.
She's got, well, I don't yell. I yell to her, but I don't yell at her about this. She's got a little bit of a temper her own self and don't like to put up with people's horse shit. So we're a good fit in that way. And there's occasionally some fireworks, but at the same time, you know, once again, getting away from wrestling, I've found that everybody in the wrestling business is crazy. Either you're crazy so you get into the wrestling business, or you get into wrestling business and the crazy people you have to deal with make you crazy. But sooner or later, everybody in the wrestling business is crazy. And I guess the biggest thing is I have never been able to admit defeat. I've never been able to say, okay, I quit. I'm not going to be able to do this. No, goddamn, I'm going to do it. I'm going to push this rock up this bridge, up this hill, no matter what. I've never been able to admit defeat. And finally, I had the epiphany where if I don't admit defeat, I'm going to die. I'm going to have a heart attack or a stroke or something. The wrestling business is dead. I cannot bring it back single-handedly. I can't save it. It's too late for that. Nobody can bring it back. A concerted effort can't bring it back because it's dead.
It's different.
No, the wrestling business is dead. There is a sports entertainment business, but the wrestling business is dead. Mm-hmm. And for the past 20 years, I've seen what was coming. And sports entertainment, let's face it, is not nearly as popular, not viewed by nearly as many people. When you look at the statistics over 30 years ago versus today, there's never been a time where fewer people were watching pro wrestling, or whatever version of it is, on television, going to see pro wrestling live in the arenas, consider themselves fans of pro wrestling. There's never been fewer guys making a full-time living. There's a lot of wrestlers, but nobody's making a full-time living at pro wrestling. Every way that you can measure whatever you call the business that happens inside a squared circle, this is the lowest in the history of over 100 years of the measurement of that sport.
Because as a people, we've changed. Fair to say?
Well, no, we've somehow figured out a way to fuck this business up. We had a business for decades and decades and decades where people with very little, if any, education, as long as they had a mind and they had some athletic ability, could become stars on television and draw tens of thousands of people to see them live in arenas across the country, a business that was conducted largely in cash, where not only did you get to be stars and make all this money and the promoters made a fortune, but you got women and you got fame and you got all this stuff, and somehow we figured out a way to fuck that up.
Well, though I think the audience has become much more cynical too.
Well,
it's a tougher people to play to. The internet, the information age has taken away a very big advantage that the wrestling business had, which was control. Control of information, control of those angles, and control of just how much I'm going to let you see. That's gone. So
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this. You're a very intelligent man, and you get on the internet for a variety of things besides professional wrestling, I'm sure. You know how wrestling is booked and how finishes are called and who does these things, right? Do you know how that the guy rolls the steamroller over Chris Angel and flattens him out onto the pavement so he's like a fucking cardboard cutout of himself, and then suddenly he pops out back to life somewhere else? Do you know how that's done?
No.
Exactly. There's an internet. Do you, boxing has always been somewhat worked, manipulated. UFC, although it's legitimate in the ring, they're using pro wrestling tricks to hype a fight.
Sure, yeah.
Everybody can see that. Well, since we're not using them, they might as well. I've said that for years, that the UFC is now the most successful pro wrestling promotion on the planet. It's just that when we got too big in the 80s for our own good, when people started noticing, not just the wrestling fans and the wrestling promoters and the wrestlers, but when mainstream people and television networks started noticing, hey, we can make millions of dollars with wrestling, that was the beginning of the end. Because then people from outside the business got inside the business, didn't take care of the business, didn't know how to promote the business without hurting the business, and most importantly, didn't know what kind of people not to let in the business.
Don't you think that you said it got too big in the 80s, but 95, 96, 97, 98.
Well, we were already on the
now
downhill
you were-
slide.
Yeah, but you still, there was a resurgence in popularity, and the buildings were full again. And
Well, yeah, but it was a completely different thing. That was a boom period of a fad of sports entertainment that wasn't going to last.
different than the 80s, yeah, okay. Yeah, the product was different.
Because it wasn't that the 80s were so big, it's just the 80s we started getting noticed. Look at the crowds in the 60s and the 70s in some of the stadiums and a lot of the territories. Jesus Christ, there were 350,000 paid admissions for pro wrestling in the city of Memphis for 51 shows in 1974. You know, Memphis wrestling was huge. There were stadiums in 1972. They ran Shea Stadium for Bruno and Pedro. Mm-hmm. Texas, Fritz von Erich's world title match with Dory Funk Jr. drew 20-something thousand people. But suddenly, in the 80s, Vince takes everything and opens it up. At the same time, he starts presenting a silly product.
He's opening it up, but he's closing territories and taking away any other option. I mean,
well, exactly. Well,
you could blame that as much as you could blame that as much as you blame Vince Russo. Why don't you hate McMahon?
Well, I do, but at least he's good at what he does. So it's like Paul Lee. You know, we may dislike each other's methods every once in a while, but I could respect him for being good at what he's done and for having talent. And the same thing with Vince McMahon, Russo. We're not going to talk about him. The point is, the 80s were the downhill slide where people started getting involved in the business that weren't going to take care of it and that didn't know who to let into it and didn't know what to say about it. And that was the beginning of the end. Vince started getting sillier, trying to appeal to a more mainstream, audience. Yes, everything was hot, but it was also hot in the 70s. Territories were selling out everywhere. Then all of a sudden, Vince gets in problems. WCW hires incompetent leadership to, put the boots to the company that they've just bought. The period of 1991 or 2 through 1995 was the worst period in modern history for wrestling in terms of ratings and live attendance and etc. And of course, that's when I opened up a company and I got impeccable timing. Then there's a boom period because now people who have been run off from wrestling, they get back into it because they see Austin and Rock.
That's true.
But they get exposed to the desensitivity of the shit, and now everybody knows what's going on in the internet and etc. Yes, that does play a large part of it because now everybody knows shit they shouldn't know, and everybody knows what's going on. And then that boom was brought to an end by Steve Austin hugging Vince McMahon because they thought it would freshen him up, and even Austin was behind it. But in hindsight, we know that and the purchase of WCW by the WWE is what led to suddenly 3 or 4 million people in a 6-month period not switching over to the other channel, but just leaving because they were either WCW fans because that was still the real wrestling and now their hope was gone, and also the new fad fans. Austin hugged McMahon. That's the one thing they didn't want to see. That was the boo no, it's not that we're mad about this and want to see what's going to happen next. It was boo, like, no, we didn't want to see this. Like in Dallas, when the people found out the Von Erichs weren't the Christian All-American boys they thought they were. They felt taken. They felt, wait a minute, they pulled the wool over our eyes. So fuck this whole thing. And they all went away, and it's never recovered. And now it's become a touring Holiday on Ice in the ring, where you go to see the show, but nobody takes it seriously. And there's no real alternative because TNA has been mismanaged, and it's looked at as the place where ex-WWF guys go if anybody knows it's there. And everybody else is playing catch up. And basically, it's the only business where there used to be, wrestling is the only form of sport or entertainment currently today where more people used to like it than do now. And also you will find since I've been going out and away from wrestling shows, so I don't see wrestling fans, but I go to comic book conventions or horror movie conventions, I see people who know me, they always say, I used to watch wrestling, but I don't anymore because it got silly or scripted or choreographed or too soap opera or too talky or fake, whereas it used to be real, or whatever their phraseology is. I used to watch wrestling, but I don't anymore. Sports entertainment, it's been a generation. And see, this is point I was trying to get to. For the past 20 years, I've been trying to find a place to keep wrestling alive, and if I had to and I couldn't find any place, I'd start my own company to keep wrestling alive. And then I finally realized, well, you know what? I can't. It's the horse has left the barn, cowboy. It's impossible. Wrestling is dead. It can't come back. When you parody something for so long, and it's been a generation now, you can't get people to take it seriously again after it's been parodied. I mean, my God, now the only thing that people think of Dave Chappelle is, I'm Rick James, bitch, because it's a parody.
It'll come back again, though.
No, it can't.
Parody does kill it, but then there's a resurgence because you got to change the horror movie, the slasher film in the 80s. You brought up horror conventions.
You think wrestling will come back. Now, sports entertainment or wrestling?
Movie and all that stuff started. We parodied it. We laughed at it. But in the last 2 or 3 years, it's come back. It needs another 10 years to get a different permutation. Maybe it's going to be in an octagon.
They already
it's going to be somehow.
They already knew that was. They already knew movies were fake.
Yeah, right, but whatever it is that the tinkering has to do to make the robot look a little different, it'll come back. Things like alternatives to sports entertainment wrestling, like Ring of Honor, let's say.
Well, and that's another thing. I was smoking the hopium. I thought
why aren't you booking for Ring of Honor right now?
Because they drove me insane. I was gonna murder the office boy. I was gonna choke him and pull his eyeballs out because I envisioned that. And let me just say this to put a period on the end of the previous thought. That's why I realized after 20 years it'd become a rib on me. I'm trying to keep wrestling alive because how the fuck did we manage to fuck this up? It was such a great business, and now very few people make a lot of money, and everybody else starves to death, and everybody knows or thinks they know and thinks they're smart to what's going on, and et cetera, and it's impossible to preserve it. And I was going to have a stroke or a heart attack. And with Ring of Honor was my last effort. I figured, okay, this is the only thing, since TNA is never going to get a second chance to make a first impression, and it is what it is. Ring of Honor is the only chance we got left. And when I saw that was obviously had been botched and was not going to work, even though it could have, maybe it couldn't have worked, and I'd be sitting here going, well, you know what? We did it exactly like I said we ought to do it. It still didn't work, and wrestling's dead. I'm going to be saying the same thing, but it'd be my fault. But at least I don't have to say it was my fault because they didn't do anything that I said.
But you don't think you're going to take blame for this?
I've taken all the blame, but I'm not accepting it because it's not my fault. See, that's the thing.
What could Hunter do for ROH that you can't?
Not talking about creative, not talking about booking at all. How the business was to be structured, how the business was to be set up, how it was to be executed, how this grand plan was going to come to fruition. It doesn't have anything to do with the creative at all. Yes, here's the thing. What I saw with Ring of Honor, when Kerry Silkin owned it, immediately Kerry called me the next day when I left TNA, and I went up and talked to him and Adam Pearce, and I said, because Kerry has always been great to me, was one of the most well thought of promoters, and obviously struggling because everybody else in the business is struggling too. It's just at whatever your level of struggling is. TNA struggling too is just whatever your level of struggling is. And I went to the matches and I saw the guys and I said, okay, there's got to be some way. This is going to be my crusade, my mission. There's got to be some way that I can take this product with these young guys, these talented guys that work and sweat and bleed and give their hearts, every time they get in the ring, and they hit each other hard and they work as hard as they can. A lot of them have never, unfortunately been trained mentally how to work for a mainstream audience, but at the same time, they also haven't been besmirched on mainstream television and haven't been beat to powder by some big, promotion. And then, now we're expected to take them as main event guys when they were doing jobs on the other guy's TV. So my thought was, burp, excuse me, that once again, that breakfast
Nothing
here,
like that Bob
these
Evans
finer
turkey
hotels.
sausage gravy or whatever.
I wish I'd had
Steve.
some gravy this morning. I'm in the north. They didn't have gravy at breakfast because this is Jersey, folks. But anyway, I don't even know if that was imitation bacon or not. Anyway, my thought was that if there was some way that we could expose this passionate audience that they have and these dedicated athletes they have to a wider audience and treat wrestling seriously, and it may even be too late to try to make them think it's real, but at least we can not wink at them. It's not the deal where John Wayne shoots the Indians off the horses and then picks them up and pats them off and shakes their hand because
But
they
they've
took
been doing
a good
that
bump.
up to that point fairly well, wouldn't you say?
Well, not to a mainstream audience.
Not to
They've been
mainstream,
doing it,
no,
but not
right.
to a mainstream. If there's some way that we could take and
Right.
get this in front of people with the rise in popularity of the UFC and MMA and a young audience, it's a young audience has never seen wrestling before. They've seen sports entertainment, they've never seen wrestling. So maybe they would fall in love with it, because I'd also noticed from talking to people that the sports entertainment fan of today can go back and watch the YouTube stuff of yesterday and kind of get into that. And in some cases, they like it a lot. But the fan of the 70s and 80s wrestling is actually mortally offended most of the time by sports entertainment, because it's just completely, totally against what they enjoyed about wrestling. So the fans of the old stuff hate the new stuff, but the fans of the new stuff can kind of get into the old stuff. So anyway, that was my thought. If we can find a way to expose this product to a wide mainstream audience, we ain't going to take over Vince. We might not even, we might not even have the budget of TNA. You can't say we can't do better than TNA, because then it's talking about, well, are we losing less money than they are? And that was my crusade. I was going to figure out some kind of way. I promised Kerry Silkin. I was going to figure out some kind of way. I promised these guys I'm going to figure out some kind of way to get you guys more work, to get you guys more recognition, to have a credible wrestling product out there as an alternative, as something they can watch it if they want to, instead of fucking hokey-ass midgets running around and fucking stupid shit and everybody laughing at wrestling, because that's what they do now. They laugh at wrestling. And wrestling was not ever made to be laughed at. I mean, in the Tarzan movie, you got a 2-hour Tarzan movie, Cheetah gets 6 minutes, right, to do whatever. But wrestling is not supposed to be laughed at. Wrestling was supposed to engender emotions. You take a guy who they are predisposed to dislike, and you take a guy who they are predisposed to like, and you expose them. And give them wins and build them up until finally, boom, they meet here, and what's going to happen? Who's going to win the title? Who's going to win the grudge match? Who's going to win the big fucking, blah, blah, blah. That's what wrestling was supposed to be. I hate that guy and I love that guy, therefore I want to see him fight and I want to see my guy win.
They still try. I know you don't watch, but they still try.
They try, but you can't do it anymore, because everybody knows that, and that's another thing. All the things that promotions do that used to work because you would put the heat on the heel. Now the heels don't get any heat because they know they're being told to do the shit. You haven't had heat in 20 years. Nobody's trying to swing at these guys and go to jail to take a fucking poke at them, run them down with their cars, pull a knife on them. I'll kill you, you son of a bitch. That you can't get that heat. Without that heat, you can't draw people repeatedly in the same place week after week, month after month, which is why they only run once, twice a year in any given market, because nobody wants to see the shit.
I want you to react to an article.
But anyway, so
Yeah,
that was my original concept for Ring of Honor. The reason why I refuse to take any blame for the way it's turned out is because they didn't follow the concept. I'm the one who wrote the proposal that Sinclair Broadcasting ended up buying the company off of. Now, I wrote a proposal based on how that Sinclair Broadcasting could work together with Ring of Honor and air a television program on their stations, and everybody could mutually benefit. They seemed to like it so much they made an offer and bought the whole freaking fucking company. And we can go over this point by point and piece by piece as we go along if you want to, but they basically didn't follow through on any of the proposal. So we'll never know, unfortunately, whether it would have worked or not. At this point, being distanced and removed from it, I'm of the mind that it wouldn't have worked, simply because, like I said, you can't get people to take wrestling seriously anymore.
Well, that I get.
But we'll never know. But I refuse to take the blame for it, even though I got the blame for it, because everybody said, Cornette fucked Ring of Honor up. And I'm not talking about the booking. The booking was the last thing. The booking they left alone. They didn't do anything else that they should have done. And while it wasn't the best work I've ever done, that's also another thing we'll get into. I was never the booker. Adam Pearce was the booker, and then Delirious was the booker. And a lot of times these guys, because, you know, Kevin Steen, for example, he's a perfect guy to be your top star and champion if you want to work for 400 people in a rec center, because he's got that mindset. But he knocks shit that I did that was just so horrible, and half the shit he's knocking is shit that Delirious did. And because we worked together, we didn't disagree on anything. And I'm not saying that to go, oh, it's his fault, it's mine. We worked together and we had no disagreements. And when you're dealing with guys that don't understand what the fuck you're trying to do, unfortunately, that's sometimes what you get. And a lot of the guys understood what we were trying to do, but the Steens of the world are never going to get it because, like I said, he's a perfect guy to be a top star if you're working for 400 people in a rec center.
If you and Hunter are booking together and making the decisions together, are you getting all the blame because you were the more high-profile name back there? Or
I guess.
Or is he telling the boys, yeah, listen, this is Jim's?
No. I haven't enjoyed working with anybody in a booking capacity more than Delirious since Kevin Sullivan 20 years ago. He's got a great mind. He does a great job. He is dedicated. Everything we did, he was the booker when Kerry Silken owned the company, and I helped him. When Sinclair Broadcasting purchased the company, because I had a name and experience, they insisted that I be termed head of creative. We never changed a thing. We worked together exactly how we had been doing it. It's just that I had a nominal title that I did not use because I can't think, if you held a gun to my head right now, I overruled him on putting Grizzly Redwood on television. He loved Grizzly. Grizzly's a great kid. Grizzly's dedicated. He's overcome a lot of health problems, but still, it didn't fit the picture. We're trying to sell Ring of Honor as serious, credible athletic wrestling, and here's this guy's 5'4" and 135 pounds with a fucking long beard, Grizzly Redwood, the world's littlest lumberjack. It was just silly. For people who knew what was going on with Ring of Honor, they would, you know, they're fine, but for people in Charleston, West Virginia, just flipping by the TV and seeing that, they're going, what the fuck is this? This is ridiculous. And that's a problem I didn't anticipate, is that we had two vastly disparate groups of fans. One, the Ring of Honor fans that wanted things, they resented the infringement on their private club. They wanted things to be the same. There is a world somewhere in this universe. I'm not sure where it is, but there is a world somewhere where it's more valuable to have the Super Smash Brothers on the card than Mike Bennett and Matt Hardy. But it ain't on this earth, right? If you want to make money. But they would be offended because why don't they book the Super? It got to be a joke between me and Delirious. Why don't we book the Super Smash Brothers? Because literally, the internet fans would say, oh, they ought to book the Super Smash Brothers. But the TV fans that we were trying to reach, that meant the difference between 400 people in a rec center and actually running a real wrestling company, Pinocchio, would have looked and go, why do they got these two fucking goofy looking guys wearing pajamas playing pro wrestler on my television?
Right, you're moving to a different market.
And you couldn't reconcile those groups.
But now, what is Sinclair's problem with you?
Well, they didn't have a problem with me until I told them I'll go fuck off.
The night in Pittsburgh.
Okay, well,
how much does that have to do?
I'll build up to it. My original concept for Ring of Honor was that I tried to address every problem that we could have ahead of time. We don't have the budget of WWE Raw or SmackDown or even TNA Impact as far as a television show to do, what they do. So we have to figure out some way that we can make this show look like we're trying and look like we're halfway competitive and, look good enough for regional television. So I proposed, same thing we did in Louisville, but on a bigger scale. You find a warehouse or you find an empty Kmart or a Target, somewhere with big parking, plenty of space, and you build out your own custom studio / wrestling arena, etc. Wooden risers, and I'm not talking about spending millions. Wooden risers, paint everything black, black wall that you can shoot colored lights on or that you can hang colorful wrestling posters on, black folding chairs, 600-700 seats, but you can take them up if you need, so it's always full. You're always sold out there at the Honor Arena. That arena also, you hang your television lights. so that all you have to do is flip a switch. You save the loadout and the rental and etc. You buy your lights and you hang them, and they're there and they're professionally focused. You flip a switch. You run the audio cables. So you save the audio guys stringing a new building, because we can't go and shoot TV in rec centers and things like that we are capable of running at the time. This was in 2011. Or else it'll look like you're shooting TV in a fucking rec center. So you have this arena, but you also, that's the place where you have your offices. That's the place where you have your merchandise storage and fulfillment off the website orders. That's also where you have your editing facilities. And that's also where you operate your wrestling training school, because we had Danny Davis standing by to help the greatest wrestling school operator and trainer in modern times, to help consult with us. And we knew exactly how to do it because we had done it, and it's still there to this day in Louisville, Ohio Valley Wrestling. Have a place in Baltimore. You'd mean to tell me that 30 aspiring wrestlers will not move to Baltimore as they've moved to Louisville for much less promise before, and get a job to support themselves and go to wrestling school so that they can be in line to be on Ring of Honor television that's going to be broadcast on 70-something stations around the country.
Okay, sounds
and
good.
Follow their dream. And they also, in addition to the gate that you draw from your television tapings, because you get a building that's zoned for public admission and for charging admission and etc., you have student shows where each student goes out and sells 10 tickets to their family and friends at $10, and you got 30 students, there's 300 people once a month for your school show. And we have access to rotating instructors, people that I'm familiar with, or people that are sympathetic to our cause, a Jerry Lynn or a Lance Storm, or somebody to come down for a week every once in a while. And you build a great training facility that feeds your talent that you already have, so that you're building for the future. Imagine that. We didn't get a facility. When they were talking about buying the company, I even saw aerial pictures. They had talked to real estate people, but then, okay, I thought it would be up and running by January of 2012. That's why I made a deal with Danny Davis to do the tapings at the Davis Arena in Louisville in October and November of 2011 to get us to where we would have our building prepared. Well, never happened.
Why?
Well, that's a capital expenditure instead of something that we got to take it out of the right pocket instead of the left pocket. I don't know why it didn't happen. Then here's another thing. I've obviously recognized that a large portion of Ring of Honor's fan base followed them through the internet, because let's say the HDNet television was, the penetration was negligible. Nobody saw it. I'd say you could be in the Federal Witness Protection Program and host a show on HDNet and you'd be fine. So since a lot of this fan base follows us on the internet, we need a state-of-the-art website. We need a state-of-the-art website instead of the old Ring of Honor website, one that would handle video on demand, and obviously one that would bring the pay-per-views in-house to where we would be producing them. We'd be airing them on ROHWrestling.com, not GoFuckYourself.tv.live, whatever the fuck.
Go Fight Live.
Yeah, whatever.
Didn't work out.
Yeah. You think? Because that's one thing I said, the longer you stay involved with these people, the quicker they're going to put us out of business one way or another. It's going to happen.
Gabe's got a company that can stream live iPay-per-views.
Well,
we're actually a content provider for them. Why didn't they ever use Gabe?
Well, because they should have been using themselves. That was the whole idea. Why split the money with somebody else when it's your product and you pump your website, bring it in-house? I was actually, at one point, I talked to Kerry preliminarily about, I said, instead of splitting the money with Go Fight Live, I'll buy the equipment. I'll buy the shit. We'll pay some people to fucking and split the money with me, because I thought the internet pay-per-view would be the first thing to take off. Because how can it not? $15, you can watch these great live wrestling shows anywhere in the world, live as they happen, on your computer in your own home. I figure, how can this go wrong? Once again, I was nuts, right? But anyway, that's the thing. Website, state-of-the-art website. I said, go to one of these, it doesn't have to be the NFL or the NBA. Go to somebody that built a website for one of these major college sports programs. They sell merchandise, they have video, blah, blah, blah. But we need a state-of-the-art website with video on demand, so that not only do we take the 4-camera broadcast quality camera package that we need to buy with portable lighting equipment, such as I see around me, and audio equipment, so we can shoot all of the live events for DVD instead of this fucking VHS camcorder prosumer shit that we're using. But with the video on demand of the live events also can come the internet pay-per-views, where if we just make sure we've got all the shit, we can do the internet pay-per-views, everything on ROHWrestling.com, bring it all in-house, keep all the money except for the production expenses.
Sounds good. Let's do it. What'd they say?
Well, the website turned out to be built by college friends of the office boy that they hired. More on this later. And and Joe,
Is this a Sinclair?
Sinclair Broadcast. Joe, I'm going to apologize right now. We've always had a good relationship. You've always been a gentleman to me, but I'm just going to tell everybody what the fuck happened, because I'm just sick and tired of fucking reading about it on the internet. And I'm out of wrestling, and I don't give a fuck whether I ever come back. So I have several friends there, and I hope they think well of me, but I'm going to tell the truth, and what the fuck. They hired an office boy from the accounting department, 26 years old. His name's Greg the office boy. And he was so brilliant that within just a few months of the first time that he ever saw a professional wrestler, he was able to tell me and Gary Jester and Delirious what was what about the wrestling business, what towns we ought to run, who we ought to book, what ticket prices we ought to charge, etc. It was amazing. He picked it up just like that. He was a genius. He was also such a flaming fucking asshole to everybody that I had to talk Charlie Haas out of knocking him out, had to talk Ernie Osiris out of knocking him out. He ran off 2 ring crews because he treated them like field hands. Everybody hated him. Nobody wanted to argue with him because he was Joe's handpicked boy to run the office. And he wasn't one of those guys that was really stupid but a nice guy and you were trying to help. He was really stupid, and he was a fucking prick to everybody. And so I was the only one that would argue with him, because I don't have the talent to listen to horse shit, especially that I've put my name on, that I've said is going to be great, and all of a sudden this fucking idiot that's never even seen a wrestler is tearing this whole idea and this whole thing apart.
Is Greg the one who you said at the hospital, that when the night Karina went to the hospital, that you were going to cause him some bodily harm?
Yeah, I was going to break his fucking neck and gouge his fucking eyeballs out, yeah. But anyway, so his college friends built the website, and everybody that's followed Ring of Honor knows for the first few months, you couldn't buy a DVD off of it. It was down as much as it was up. And because to save money, because I found out they like to save money. That's a big thing with Sinclair Broadcasting. They like to save money. I was all in favor of running as low budget a wrestling operation as possible if we executed the plan that I had proposed that they bought the company on. That actually probably would have saved money in the long run, because my thing was, nobody runs a cheaper business than Danny Davis, and he stayed in business and made money. He's probably the only profitable wrestling promotion besides the WWF in the fucking world, where he runs on a shoestring because he bought everything, he owned everything, he brought everything in-house, and he depends on nobody but himself. So anyway, the website didn't happen, and I should have known we were in trouble when we were going to get a new logo. And instead of going to a professional graphics company, Greg opened up a contest on the internet for people to design their own, and the winner would get like 2 free T-shirts. I don't know what the fuck. I don't know. That was the least of my worries at that time. Then the internet pay-per-views. I said, my God, the website is not working. How are we going to bring well, we'll stick with Go Fight Live, because they said it's in the contract they signed that they can do this. And I said, it could be in the contract they signed that Pamela Anderson would come to us and blow us every fucking day. It doesn't matter. It doesn't mean it's going to happen, because they have not ever done anything else right. There were constant small problems. And everybody looks back and goes, well, they used to do it okay. No, they didn't used to do it okay. They used to avert the major catastrophe. A show in New York where Carino and Cabana and Steen and Generica, they had the double tag team chain match. We went off the air for 8 minutes when they were going into the finish. We had to send the referee down, stall. This was Go Fight Live before Sinclair was involved. This was the old Ring of Honor. Stall. Fuck. They would show up, we'd be short a camera and have to borrow a camera from High Spots, or 100 feet of audio cable. Can somebody go to Radio Shack? It was that type of operation. They were set up on a table like this, and I could tell that David Klarman, the guy who ran Go Fight Live, was fucking in over his head. He was an idiot, didn't know what he was doing, and he brought a couple of guys who didn't really know how to run the shit, and I didn't know enough about the shit to know whether or not that the shit they had worked, or it just was the fucking loose nut behind the wheel. But one way or another, there was always constant little problems. And see, they were just, also the original pay-per-views from Ring of Honor, they were just broadcasting, the 3-camera shoot of there wasn't any graphics, there wasn't any replays. They weren't trying to make it a real television production. Right. We started trying to make it a real television production, and that put added strain on Go Fight Live, Because now they've not just got to fucking roll a camera, they've got, oh shit, we got a director, somebody's telling us to take shots, and we've got replays, and we've got packages, we got VTRs, and we've got goddamn graphics we got to put up. That's why you'd see fucking graphics would appear suddenly without anybody punching a button. It'd just pop up. And the fucking director's going, what the fuck is this? Dan Bynum, right? What? They just, things would appear, or the sound would go away, or the sound wouldn't go away when you wanted it to go away. They were in over their heads.
Okay.
And we weren't ready with the website because I thought Final Battle 2011 should be the first internet pay-per-view that is aired on ROHWrestling.com and that is completely ours, and we were way not ready for that. And they weren't looking like they were going to spend the money to get ready for that, and they weren't going to get away from Go Fight Live. And we'll talk more about the pay-per-view business later on, but also the wrestling school didn't materialize. The wrestling school didn't materialize because they suddenly said, oh, but that's a liability. They wouldn't take if somebody got hurt, Sinclair Broadcasting, we could be liable.
Right.
We had a release that we had used in Louisville for years that the attorneys of the World Wrestling Entertainment Incorporated Company, whatever the fuck their name is, had approved that seemed to prevent them from being afraid they were going to be sued. So instead of having a building with a school in it that would pay the rent on that building, that we could have 24 hours a day, 7 days a week and do the tapings, after about a year or so, they agreed to let Hunter start training guys in the old building in the warehouse in Bristol, which was not the state-of-the-art wrestling school that I had envisioned and dreamed of, a place where we could train guys for this new style and new brand of wrestling that we were going to be presenting, where guys like Davey Richards and Eddie Edwards and Roderick Strong and the Briscoes and the top talent, along with veteran trainers, could fucking take new guys in and say, this is the Ring of Honor style, this is the way we do things. No, we got some guys in a fucking warehouse in Bristol, and Delirious is doing the best he can while he's still booking and fucking going to the towns, and also he's going to train a few guys. But, you know, anyway, that income stream
As these things aren't happening, though.
As these things aren't happening.
Are you being vocal to Greg? I mean, are you saying that we're off the track here?
Here's the thing.
The reason
I was trying
Sinclair
to
came
be,
in was
that was my problem. I was trying to be nice, Jim. I wasn't being vocal to Greg, because that was, once again, it's like talking to that goddamn air conditioning unit there, because he was an idiot and a prick, and he thought he knew everything. I was talking to Joe, but I was trying to be nice, Jim, instead of going, goddamn, what the fuck is going on? What are we doing here? We're fucking this up. Because I have that way of coming off to people outside. See, inside the wrestling business, that's normal conversation. But for people outside the wrestling business, that's not normal conversation. So I was trying to be nice. And also, I tried to rely on Gary Jester, my old friend Gary Jester, who had been the one who had been friends with Joe Koff, who made this introduction to begin with, because I got the talent. Hunter and I got the talent that we promised them for the price that we promised them we'd get them for. Got them signed fucking contracts. We were booking the company where the cards were drawn just as well as they had ever been. We were coming off a string of critically acclaimed shows. Everybody seemed to think creative was moving along swimmingly. And that was when we were doing the same thing, Hunter and I, working the same way together, but suddenly Sinclair, I told him a big company is buying this independent wrestling organization, so naturally they're going to view you as the fucking Republicans, the evil empire. They're going to fuck up our wrestling. They're going to change our wrestling. We can't alienate the existing fans before we get new fans. So besides the fact that we didn't get a location to tape in Baltimore, a multi-purpose location, an Honor Arena, besides the fact we didn't get the state-of-the-art website, besides the fact we didn't bring the internet pay-per-views in-house, despite the fact that we were a television production company that did not own a broadcast quality camera from June of 2011 until September of 2012.
That's what I was going to ask.
And then we got a stripped down package from the news department. Instead of getting new shit, we got a stripped down package from the Sinclair news department where they pulled the old fucking Tennessee shim sham on us and gave us shit that they had gotten that they didn't want because they couldn't get parts because the tsunami wiped out the fucking factory. I'm not making this up. So the shit was literally stripped down and falling apart, and our editor, Mark Davis, was having to build the shit together when we got it, so it still wasn't usable for the first few months after we got it. Besides all of that, I said, don't alienate the existing Ring of Honor fans. Well, what's the first thing they do? The first thing they do is they raise the ticket prices to the live events. The first thing they do is they don't want to run the existing Ring of Honor markets. They want to run the TV markets. So, well, if we're only going to draw 500 people, we might as well draw 500 people in a TV market instead of a non-TV market. We'll make the TV stations happy, which was a good thought, except we were drawing 500 people in a non-TV market. We went to a TV market, we'd draw 300 because we only been on the air for fucking 12 weeks. And the ticket prices are jacked up. And they tried to go through Ticketmaster because it'd been a while since Gary Jester had been in the business. And he wouldn't fucking listen to me. You're not, Gary, you haven't been involved in independent wrestling. Yes, we used to run Greensboro on Sunday afternoon. We used to do a lot of things. Don't work anymore. Listen to me. Okay. So that was, then Greg, the office boy, hired the guy who got tremendous, PR fucking disaster. What was his name? Can't even think of his name. He was supposed to do social media because Dave Lagana had promised us he'd be our social media guy, and then he bailed and fucking went back on his word to go work for TNA and that sinking ship. Patrick Edwards. Greg, the office boy, tells Patrick Edwards what's to say about shit, especially when we have pay-per-view disasters, what to say about shit. And he gets on there and says it, and there's an uproar, and they're all, who's this fucking Patrick Edwards, and why are we listening to him, and what the fuck is he saying? And it was Greg, the office boy, telling him to say that shit, but they were mad at the company. The fans got mad at Sinclair Broadcasting, and then they started getting mad at me, because what the fuck? And, excuse me. So just rapidly, everything started going downhill. But for the first 6 months, I was still gung-ho because creatively, we had built from the debut of television in September of 2011. We were going to get final battle of 2011 was going to be good, but we were really looking at our coming out party being WrestleMania weekend, the 2 shows in Fort Lauderdale in March of 2012, and then the big one, the one that, boy, now we're going to have been on the air for like 6-7 months, and internet pay-per-view, we'll have all the bugs worked out, and we'll probably be in-house by then. Border Wars in Toronto, Canada. So creatively, this was our story arc, our plan. And the Fort Lauderdale shows, for everybody that saw them, and they did good business live, and they were fucking excellent live, and nobody saw them on pay-per-view. Because the first night, we had told them we were running the War Memorial in Fort Lauderdale, and it's also a friend of mine who shall remain nameless just in case he doesn't want to be named, got that building because all the other wrestling promotions tried to get the building. He couldn't because it was booked, but he was friends with the manager, so he got him to move the show that was in there, a gun and knife show, and gave us the date. So we had the great location there. We booked tremendous card there. We had Lance Storm come in, blah, blah, blah. We had told them 2 months beforehand, go, because we're still with Go Fight Live, because they just wouldn't, they just kept believing a guy who was, I don't care whether David Klarman believed that he was telling the truth when he said he was going to do all these things or not. I told him from the start he couldn't do it. They're not capable of it. It's going to fuck up sooner or later. The building wasn't wired, since it's a city building, it wasn't wired up to date, so they had to go down and put some gizmo in Framstad or whatever the fuck. And according to people that I've talked to that know about these things, it should have been doable, but they didn't do it right. And so we're halfway into the fucking show almost, and we don't know there's a problem because it looks great in the arena and it looks great on the monitors and it's going great. And I see Klarman on the phone, right on his cell phone, and he starts going behind the table that all the equipment's set up on, looking at shit. I come to find out later on he's talking to the tech people because he knows there's a problem and he's trying to figure out what's plugged into where. He steps on a power strip, an $8.99 power strip from Home Depot, and everything goes bad. Mark Davis, the editor, goes, what the fuck? He's watching all this bank of monitors where we're rolling all this stuff onto, not tape, but recording it for later television. Everything goes black. I'm like, motherfucker, get out from behind the fucking, what are you doing? You club-footed moron. And they hit it and everything comes back on, so that was a blink. Come to find out, the audio and the video are like 30 seconds off, and the video's running fast and slowing down, and the audio's all off, and it's unwatchable. And now we find out that everybody on social media is blowing up. What the fuck is this shit? They didn't calibrate their shit right. And I fucking blew up because I left at intermission and went out back, and me and Delirious were both out there screaming at the top of our lungs, just to get it out so we wouldn't go throttle somebody. I said, fix this shit, right? Come back in after the second half, it's not fixed yet. And, you know, I was sitting there looking, I'm like, what the fuck? How can we be doing this? And Dan Bynum, the director, made some remark like, I wish somebody'd get Klarman in here and tell him what a fucking idiot he is. I said, yeah, somebody get that fucking, where is that fucking, I look over and there he is, it's dark in the room, right? I said, you're a fucking idiot. You fucking put us out of the pay-per-view business, you stupid son of a bitch. I knew this was gonna fucking happen. We're never gonna do another one of these again because nobody will ever fucking buy it, so fuck you, you fucking idiot. And I just fucking left to watch the show from the stage for the rest of the night because what the fuck. So they worked all night and they synced everything up and did what they should have done to begin with, and the next day it was working perfectly, which means they just didn't do it right the first time. And around about the third match, for some reason, the whole neighborhood had a brownout. Not a blackout, but a brownout. So just the power to some things died and weakened or whatever. And because they were plugged into fucking Home Depot power strips and didn't have an uninterruptible power source, and it was down long enough, it cleared all their computers that had to be rebooted and knocked us off again, and the whole fucking weekend was a disaster. And everybody's like, Ring of Honor, these stupid fucks, what are they doing? They don't know what the fuck they're doing. And that's when... And still, at that point, Kevin Kelly, I remember Kevin Kelly made a statement when he was doing a promo trying to plug Border Wars. And they said, will this be with Go Fight Live? He said, no fucking way, right? Joe got hot and called him up and made it. We haven't made that a decision yet. We haven't made that statement yet. He's afraid of offending anybody. Come to find out, these corporate people are afraid of offending anybody. That's why I quit doing interviews, to publicize Ring of Honor and to, especially with the insider sheets and websites and etc. Instead of putting blame where blame is and either saying, yeah, we fucked up and we ain't gonna do it again, or no, it wasn't our fault, it was these fuckers, or whatever. That's why the fans liked me when Kerry Silken owned Ring of Honor. I couldn't fucking go out there and say the shit that I wanted to say because somebody would get upset because I had knocked someone, whether they richly deserved it or not. So I just quit doing interviews. So then all of a sudden they stop hearing from Jim Cornette and they think, well, fuck, he's obviously behind all this shit.
Around this time we were doing our live iPay-per-view with Vince Russo, and it did give me special joy on our frequently asked questions page on the order page to say, by the way, we are not using the vendor that Ring of Honor is using for this, so you may order with no fear.
With no fear.
Yes.
So, and so that was the last Go Fight Live, because now they have to do something, so they're going to bring Border Wars in-house, right? And they found a company to do it, and Greg the office boy was the spearhead of testing the, oh yes, we've been tested, and they put up a thing for free to see if they could handle the traffic. Well, apparently they didn't think that, when people are paying for this shit, it might be a little different than just watching it for free. So obviously everybody knows my well-documented problems going to Canada, but we had built Border Wars as an ultimate card. We had Fit Finlay, we had Rhino, we had Lance Storm, we had Kevin Steen winning the world title. We had the best card, I would say, not only one of the best independent wrestling cards, but that was a card in ring and with names and etc. the WWF would have been proud of, anybody would have been proud of. And we sold out live, 1,500 people in the Ted Reeve Arena in Toronto for Border Wars. And that was supposed to be, from our original planning, our big fuck where we sold 2,000, 2,500 pay-per-views before we added 70 television stations. Now we've added 70 television stations. We've been on the air for like 8 months now. We can do 4,000 or 5,000 with these names that everybody recognizes in this card and built.
What was the buy?
Well, it doesn't matter because nobody fucking saw it. Well, the buy was not nearly that because we'd gone off the air in Fort Lauderdale.
But you didn't have an advance coming in of a few hundred?
It was promising, but the big thing is, why do you buy a pay-per-view in advance, especially on the internet? You just log on.
That's true.
They logged on all together and blew up their shit, and nobody saw Border Wars. In the arena, it was a fucking incredible show top to bottom. Out of the arena, it was in the Federal Witness Protection Program, and nobody saw it. And once again, Ring of Honor, these stupid fucks, what the fuck are they doing? They don't know what the fuck they're doing. And that was all anybody could talk about. Instead of the great shows that we were producing, all they could talk about was how they were inept again, and now here's another pay-per-view gone off the air. So then they go to Best in the World, and they get a company from Toronto that had done such a good job, and unfortunately nobody could see it because the problem was not with the production company, the problem was with the goddamn website and the stream and whatever the fuck. So Best in the World was great. But of course now we've had 3 in a row that didn't air, so of course not a lot of people bought it. So then they do another one in Providence, Rhode Island in July to show people that we could, even though it was never even supposed to be a pay-per-view. Then the people bitched, well, that ain't a pay-per-view card. What's it supposed to be? It's supposed to be a fucking house show card. And 2 weeks out, they say, let's do a pay-per-view. Show them we can. Okay, I don't know if people are going to accept this as a pay-per-view card. Well, it doesn't matter. So then, well, how dare Jim Cornette book this fucking shitty card for a pay-per-view that was supposed to be a goddamn spot show in Providence to begin with? And they just so then, okay, now we've done 2 in a row. Now that we're sure we know how to do it, let's go to Chicago. Chicago in September of 2012. I get to Chicago to the arena, and I'm looking around. I said, Dan Bynum, the director. I said, Dan, I said, we using some different shit today? He said, well, some of the audio equipment didn't make it. I said, how do you mean? Well, so, some of it didn't get I said, Dan, because he's not a good liar, right? He didn't want to tell me. He thought, what the fuck? I said, Dan, what happened? Takes me out behind the fucking building. He said, well, here's what happened. Because the company from Toronto was the one that gave the cheapest bid, and they did a good job. The company from Toronto that did the May show, they didn't do Best in the World. That's right. I've started to tell a lie. Best in the World and one from Providence was somebody else, right? But the company from Toronto put a bid in that was cheaper, so they were going to use the company from Toronto for Chicago. The company from Toronto, and I swear I'm not making this up. I wish I was. The company from Toronto, as I was told, that was coming to Chicago to do the pay-per-view had never done an event in the United States of America before, and therefore they didn't have the paperwork that they were supposed to have to come across the border because they didn't know they needed something that Ring of Honor could have given them if they'd have been asked for it, but they didn't know. So the point is, they turned their whole crew and group of shit around at the border and fucking sent them back. So with 24 hours notice, Dan Bynum in Chicago, between a Friday afternoon and a Saturday afternoon, had to find and piece together some shit that they could broadcast a fucking internet pay-per-view with. That's why the fucking, the audio looked one way and the video looked the other way. And by the way, Go Fight Live one time, I got to back up. Toronto, Davey Richards and Tyler Black. I'm broadcasting that match with Kevin Kelly. And Go Fight Live forgot to bring microphones. So basically this little clip-on thing here, oh shit. Well, it's live television, folks. Keep that in.
They did better than we did.
Keep that in. Instead of even the little bulb here, they didn't have the little windscreen and they didn't have the clip. So what they did was, inside our jacket, they had me open my suit jacket and they duct taped the microphone with no windscreen and no clip on the inside of my jacket and then close. And I'm like, how?
Scratch the.
Well, of course. I'm like, what the fuck? And they said, no, it's very sensitive. It'll work. So me and Kevin are doing commentary like this with no visible microphones, like we're just having a conversation at ringside. That was Go Fight Live. But anyway, so Chicago, September 2012, whatever that pay-per-view was, that was the equipment that they could get together, and that was the crew they could get together, and they put it all together, and there were 3 different streams, as I understand it, and one of them worked, but 2 of them didn't, and people were on the fucking internet again going, what the fuck are they doing? And, it was lucky we had anything to broadcast with, but instead of telling the fucking story, Joe just wanted to say, well, we understand that some people had a problem, and I think that's when Greg told the office boy told the Patrick Edwards guy to concentrate on the positive, which is finally what got him fucking fired because people were bringing pitchforks and fucking, switchblades after him because they wouldn't acknowledge the problem because nobody ever wanted to apologize and take responsibility. So the fans had to fucking knock us. And once again, since I was the one that said, oh, this is going to be so great, Jim Cornette's ruined the Ring of Honor. What the fuck is he doing? Then they're starting to pick apart the booking. Well, once again, like I said, there's a planet somewhere where people would rather see a Super Smash Brother than fucking Matt Hardy or Mike Bennett, but it's not here because we were trying to make money and grow as a company, and we were trying not to alienate the existing Ring of Honor fans, but the office was doing a wonderful job of doing that at every turn by abandoning the towns that Ring of Honor had cultivated until they finally realized they couldn't draw other places. Then they'd go back to them, but now they pissed them off because they left them to begin with, the Starrcade principle, and they took Starrcade out of Greensboro and took it to Chicago. And they're saying such stupid things on the fucking internet and not taking responsibility for all these fuck-ups. And every single point of the original proposal and document that I had written was not being followed through with because it was too expensive or it's too much money or it just ain't going to work or we can't get the liability release or whatever the fuck. And then finally, I'll tell you what, in June of 2012 is when I think I finally mentally checked out. Charleston, West Virginia. I got contacted by the sales manager of the television stations there. We were on every weekend on both the Fox and the ABC affiliates in Charleston, West Virginia, and by their numbers, not mine, not Ring of Honors, by their station numbers, we had 22,000 households per week watching Ring of Honor wrestling. That was an old Crockett town. They like wrestling in them there hills. The sales manager was an old Crockett fan. He desperately wanted a live event to come to Charleston. The station manager of both stations had been with Sinclair forever and was always behind anything that they were behind and wanted to bring the live, wrestling to Charleston, Huntington. And so I went over there and met with them. And we went over to the Civic Center, which was still being managed by they even still had some of the same janitors as from the 80s. When Crockett used to run there, they knew the potential of wrestling. I went over and I've talked to some of the radio station people at these two rock stations, two of the afternoon DJs, one at each rock station, one in Charleston, one in Huntington, natural rivalry there. We're both wrestling fans and put me on the air for free and agreed to be in the corners of the tag team. So we had radio wars, so they do live call-ins and plug the matches live on the radio and what's going to happen. And I went over and made another trip and went with the sales manager and a couple of members of his staff, and we sold the local wacky car dealer and we sold Hooters. I think there was a furniture store involved at like $28,000 worth of sponsorships for the live event, which the station got, but they wouldn't have gotten it without Ring of Honor coming to town. That's another thing. That was part of my proposal also, that when you bring the live event to town, not only is there the gate revenue and the merchandise sales for Ring of Honor, but also there's the added value of being able to sell sponsorships for the local stations. They're getting something off this program that's on their air. So even if Ring of Honor doesn't get the money, even if stations get the money, Sinclair owns everything. So which pocket are you putting in? It's still going in your pants, right? So we sold $28,000 worth of sponsorships because that's another thing. They hadn't had anybody out there selling stuff live, or at least not successfully if they were trying. And I was trying to make this a model of how you can go to these TV markets, you can get the radio stations involved, you can get the TV stations involved, you can sell local sponsorships with whether it be the pizza place or the wacky car dealer or the Hooters or whatever, and everybody can make money and generate some revenue. And what do we need with all of that promotion? They even gave us cut-ins on the noon news where they were building the ring, and on the 6 o'clock news where the guys were standing in front of the ring, on network affiliates, local broadcast stations. What do you need when you've got all those sponsors and you've got a great card and you've got a building that wants to work with you and you have all these people that are into it? You need a crowd, right? And you're in Charleston, West Virginia, and you got a room that seats 1,000 people and you want to fill it up, right? So what do you do when you're a new wrestling promotion that's been on the air for at that time 10 months and you're making your first live debut in the entire state of West Virginia? You want to go in there and sell it out, right? So the office boy says, well, if we only draw 700 people in Chicago, why would we draw that many people in Charleston, West Virginia? Because Chicago's this big. I said, because they're going to promote it, and because the people want to see wrestling, and because it's going to be an event around town instead of just something else going on in giant Chicago. Right. So he sets the ticket prices. First row, $60. Second row, $50. Third row, $40. General admission, $20. It was cheaper to get into fucking SmackDown than to get into the fucking ballroom at the Charleston Civic Center. I said, are you out of your mind? And see, every week, Gary Jester wanted to have a conference call with myself and Delirious and Greg the office boy and Ross with merchandise and Mark Davis with editing and Dan Bynum, the director, and himself, and talk about business. And every week it became the Jim Cornette and Greg argument, where I would argue with this fucking idiot over something else that he was trying to do, because he wouldn't listen when everybody, not just me, but anybody would try to nicely say that it wouldn't work, but nobody wanted to argue with him. So then they'd just roll over and I'd be the one to argue with him, because I don't roll over, especially for people that don't know what the fuck they're talking about. So I said, no, make it the $30 front row, $20 second row, and get up a general admission for $15, and we'll jam this fucking place. I drive through West Virginia every 2 weeks. They don't have that much money. Mm-hmm. 2 people on the front row with parking, a hot dog, and a fucking beer is going to be $150. Charleston, West Virginia, that's your fucking rent. Greg, you've never been out of Baltimore. Listen to me. He's offended, right? So he shuts up, and we're talking about other stuff, and you hear him tapping on his keyboard. Jumps back in 5 minutes later. Ringling Brothers was just there, and they charged more than that. I said, it's a fucking circus! You fucking idiot! It's the fucking circus! They've been around for 150 fucking years! It's a goddamn rite of passage in the United States of America to go to the circus. Everybody goes to the circus. What do you want us to do? Book a dancing fucking bear? It was, and then Joe would lurk on the conference calls. He wouldn't act like he was on it. He would just listen to see, and he would always hear us. So then every once in a while, he would have to jump in. That's when he jumped in. Okay, every blah, 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 blah. We go in with those ticket prices. We do 302 people.
You the $60 tickets
Yes,
you're talking about.
yes, and it was a fucking disaster because there was nobody there. And then the TV station still wanted to try again, and of course they fucking book another date after I'm gone and then turn around and canceled it because there wasn't a big advance ticket sale. They canceled it 5 weeks out. And once again, and then also, part of the deal was some of the guys were going to go over and have a chicken wing eating contest at Hooters after the show. I'd set that up with part of when I went and did the Dog and Pony show to sell sponsorship, and I got a phone call. And we were taping 2 hours of TV there that day where they didn't let us use a TV truck anymore at this point. They found a TV trailer. Like one of those horse trailers that you draw, or like a U-Haul where it's got mom's attic, but it's not the truck, it's the trailer that pulls. A guy cut a fucking door in the side of the trailer and put all this digital video equipment in it. And you put a box in next to it, and you step up on the box and go in the side, and you sit in there in the TV trailer. And they sprang that one on us that summer in Baltimore. We were using a truck that we were getting a deal on because Spruce McCrae, Cross Creek Television Productions down in Alabama, he used to do wrestling with his only truck in the 80s, but now his business has prospered and grown, and he's got a bunch of trucks, so he still likes wrestling and gave us a deal through people that we knew on a nice truck that he didn't use too much because it wasn't HD, and he's gone into the HD business because he does regional sports and all this shit. Well, it was cheaper to use this fucking horse trailer, and they also cut us down from a 2-day setup in Baltimore to a 1-day setup in Baltimore. So as a result, that fucking week, or that day at the taping, we couldn't talk to the referees. All the audio channels were all off. Where there was no communication. The shows were vastly over time. We couldn't get anybody to hear anything. The sound was the shits, blah, blah, blah. I nearly had a nervous breakdown. So I went the fucking next day before I had to go to post the shit at the station. I went to Red Lobster across the street from my hotel, and I had 2 lobster Bloody Marys and goddamn everything on the menu to placate myself so I could go in and begin attacking this shit. And then that week, Greg, the office boy, sent a memo out saying that, remember, we only have $35 a day to eat on unless approved per Joe Koff. And even though my average was $37 per day on that trip because of my big Red Lobster blowout, and he said, alcoholic beverages and multiple appetizers will typically make this goal difficult to achieve. And sent it to everybody. So everybody knew he was talking about me. So I sent back to everybody, yes, but they have also been shown to prevent violent psychotic episodes in rhesus monkeys in laboratory tests. Just a thought to ponder. You little prick motherfucker.
How do you part ways there?
So wait a minute. Oh, I ain't even halfway done yet.
Yes,
if
you
we're
are.
going to do this, no, I ain't even
Yes,
halfway
you are.
done yet. So if we're going to do this, so anyway.
Oh, God.
So anyway, let's see where. Oh, and then there was a time in the production meeting where I threw my formats down because gorilla position. You know what the gorilla position is, right? Well, I must back up. I digress. Where we started taping in Baltimore was the Dew Burns Arena on the Inner Harbor. It's a soccer building. They have a net all the way around. It would look horrible on television. So they figured out they could build a box by getting black pipe and drape all the way to the ceiling, down the sides here and down the back. And they had a company that would build the bleachers where they brought the stuff in, and they custom made bleachers so that you had a little wrestling arena, much like the idea was to have in the facility that we should have had.
And you'd
all
own
the time.
everything.
Well, no, we didn't own everything then because they were renting the pipe and drape and they were renting the bleachers. So it was $10,000 or more just to rent the pipe and drape and bleachers, plus the building rent to tape television there. And we only had the building whenever we taped.
The 10,000 was every
taping, yes. So we taped 8 times that year at the Dew Burns Arena. They spent $80,000 just on pipe and drape instead of building a place once again. So, but anyway, at least it was the same facility, and that was the one town that we built, right? Where people started coming. We drew between 400 and 800 people at each taping, and the Baltimore fans, which Ring of Honor had not run since 2004 or whatever, they were into it, and they were coming and they were bringing signs and everything. That was great. But the gorilla position, here's another thing. I threw my formats one time, one of the production meetings, because we had a very small staff, and Hunter and I were both in the truck, right? Because I was he had never worked in a television truck before, or a trailer, as it turned out, so I was trying to teach him what to do when you cue the music and cue the announcers, and make sure to feed the announcers their bullet points that they already have on notes, but in case they hadn't hit it, or tell the director, here, watch, don't miss this, the big dive's coming up, whatever the case may be. So while we're in the truck, we need somebody in the building on gorilla position that the guys will listen to say go, blah, blah, blah. Well, when Tom Pritchard was released by the folks he was working for, I said, it's great. Who's got more experience with
Bruce
working?
or Tom?
Tom Pritchard.
Okay.
Because remember, Tom was training in the WWE developmental program for quite some. I said, who better that works with young talent, that knows wrestling, that's been, that has trained guys, blah, blah, blah. He knows this. He's good. Let's get it. So we had a meeting. I told Joe and Greg, the office boy, we get Tom Pritchard. He can come up. He can work gorilla position. He can help us agent the matches, set things up, because it was everything that Hunter and I could do on a taping day, since we were doing 4, sometimes 5 shows. I would get there at 10:30, 11 in the morning. The guys were supposed to get there at noon. We're always late. And we would work laying stuff out, haggling over stuff, getting stuff set up until bell time. Then we would get in the truck, and then, except when I was running in to make a ruling because I was the on-air commissioner in the suit sweating, I would be in the truck running back and forth. Gorilla position, one time, we had a stage manager from Baltimore. Okay, she was a nice lady, but at the same time, not a lot of the guys are going to listen to her. And also, we never had the same crew past one of our cameramen and maybe a couple of the other people, because it was spores, station personnel on remotes. I actually had a friend of mine, I won't mention his name in case it would cause heat, although I don't know why it would, because he doesn't work for anybody in wrestling anymore, but he started out as a handheld camera guy for the WWF back in the 80s and ended up being their director. He directed a live 20-camera shoot for WrestleMania, lived an hour and a half, 2 hours from Baltimore. And a good friend of his was the guy who was the head handheld camera guy for the WWF for years and years, and had shot more wrestling than, Carter has liver pills. So he, as a favor to me, came over and directed one night's taping for free to show the guys and to teach everybody, and brought his camera guy over for a payoff to teach the camera guys how to shoot wrestling. But then the next taping, almost all the people were different except for Dan, the director, and the head camera guy, and et cetera, et cetera. So that went for naught. And with the gorilla position, this is where I was going for this story. One time I'm screaming on the thing, send security, who's on gorilla in there? I storm into the building. I said, who's on security? And somebody said, Bill. I said, who the fuck is Bill? And I turn around. We had a wrestling school tryout seminar that weekend, and one of the guys that had paid his money but had injured his knee and couldn't participate still came because he wanted to show how dedicated he was, and they hung the fucking headset on him and told him, you tell the guys when to go.
Who?
Bill!
No, who makes that decision?
Somebody in the goddamn building after I'd gotten in the truck. Because there was, unless I cloned myself and Hunter the same, we couldn't be everywhere.
Without running it by you?
I don't, what the fuck? Sean tried to get me to explain to Republicans. I'd have as much luck. But anyway, so that became a running joke. Bill's on gorilla. So anyway, because Tom Pritchard, I said he'd do it for $500 in a plane ticket, and they were, and other thing. Right. So anyway, so that, the pay-per-view we last left off was in Chicago in September of 2012. So by this point, it has become obvious that the existing Ring of Honor fans are up in arms because Jim Cornette is just an idiot and he's killed the fucking booking. And the fucking company is about as popular as crotch rot, with all the PR nightmares and the fucking budget situation and the fucking production and just everything is. I'm waking up mad every day. And finally, I was talking to Hunter and we had an idea. Maybe we can figure out some way to turn this around without spending any money, but with PR. Since I'm taking a lot of the heat, I'll step down. I will, and basically we didn't want to work the boys. We came up with the idea that Hunter would become the head of creative. Even that's what Sinclair had called me, but even though we were working together, we would continue doing the same thing. It's just that he would be the head of creative and I would help him. And so as not to work the boys, we would legitimately make this switch. And then we'd do the same thing we've been fucking doing and that we had planned to do because that wasn't the problem, but we would be legitimate with it. So how do I take myself off the air as matchmaker and get a popular matchmaker who we had our idea for? And so we had a meeting with Joe and Greg, the office boy, was sitting there, and I couldn't give a fuck whether he dropped dead or caught on fire, but we told Joe, I've got a lot of heat with the existing Ring of Honor fans. The new television fans, when I go out, they like me because they remember they didn't know Ring of Honor existed before, so they're fine with me. But these vocal fuckers on the internet, they hate me, and maybe if I got out of the picture publicly, it would do better for our PR, and we will install Nigel McGuinness as the on-camera matchmaker, because who can't respect Nigel, especially the old Ring of Honor fans? But he's an ex-wrestler, he looks good, etc. He can be the matchmaker, and he can restore honor to Ring of Honor. So we'll take me off the air, I'll sit in the truck and continue doing that job. We'll take Nigel from color and make him the matchmaker, and we'll get a new color commentator. More on that later, there's another story there. So how am I going to take myself off? So I'm the first guy in wrestling that ever demoted himself, right? I come up with the idea, even though I'm 250 pounds, 2 bad knees, bad hip, bad shoulder, bad neck, bad everything, haven't taken a bump in 5 years, we're wanting to push Jay Lethal as being anti-authority and fucking mad because he hadn't got his rightful shot. So we're going to be in his hometown, Rahway. It's 2 miles from where he grew up and went to school and etc. And we will have him wrestle Kevin Steen. And his parents will be there because that's where they took him to see his first wrestling match or whatever when he was 14 years old. This is all literally pretty much all true, so which makes it better. So he and Steen have the match, and his mother, the story was out here in the Observer here not long ago, so there's a precedent for this. Danny Hodge actually was wrestling Angelo Savoldi in Oklahoma one night, and Hodge's father got mad when Savoldi was getting heat on Hodge and stabbed Angelo Savoldi, cut him so bad as 60-something stitches, right? So his mother and father were going to get mad, and they were going to throw a drink on Steen, and Steen, without thinking, was going to spit at whoever did it, and all of a sudden it's his mother, and Lethal was going to say, "You spit on my mother, you motherfucker," and they were going to get in a real fight, and just fucking chaos and trash ringside, throw the whole thing out. And then when he was raging, trying to get Steen for spitting on his mother in the locker room, I was going to go up to him, "Jay, calm down," and he was going to pitch me over the fucking table. You may have seen the clip, I don't know. The look on your face indicates you didn't see the clip. But Jay grabs me and runs me, and I sit and take it.
I bought the pay-per-view, it didn't work.
Well, no, this wasn't even on pay-per-view. This was actually on free television, so that sometimes worked. But I set a table up and I set a bunch of shit on it, and I figured I used to do this in my younger days. Hopefully I won't kill myself, but this is, and he fucking runs me and I get thrown over the table, turn the table over, land in a fucking garbage can, boom, I'm laid there, he fucking goes off. Now Cornette's injured, and I really was having physical therapy done on my hip, so we even got pictures of the guy working on me to play this up, and Cornette is incapacitated, can't travel, so we're gonna have to name a new matchmaker. And coincidentally, this happens, and of course the next week we're in Toronto. I can't go to Canada anyway, but the card was already booked, but son of a bitch, it worked. The internet fans said Toronto is the greatest show ever in history. Thank God Cornette didn't have anything to do with it. The booking has become wonderful again. Literally 7 days after I get put out, we've already booked the card and everything. We know what's going to go on. But now I don't have anything to do with it, so it's the greatest thing that's ever happened. And then the first TV of November, Nigel comes out and reveals himself as the new matchmaker. And of course, the people, love it, and it's great, right? And since that was supposed to be a surprise, we didn't have a color guy at that taping, because how can you have a color guy at the taping already when you don't know that your color guy is going to, right? So there was going to be that interim period, and we were going to announce the new color man at Final Battle. But now he's going back to Belle Vernon. We're starting to get to the tail end of this dog, right? So I drive 700 and something miles to Rahway, New Jersey to have myself flung over a fucking table at the age of 51 while goddamn, you know, in bad physical condition so that I can demote myself from a job that I've got heat for that I fucking didn't fuck up to begin with because of all the shit that's gone on around me. So I'm already not happy. But the November taping where Nigel is going to make his appearance and blah, 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 all this other stuff is not in Baltimore. It's in Bell Vernon, Pennsylvania. Now, we'd had one other little kerfluffle. We're at the meeting where I told him, yeah, we're going to fucking demote me and he's going to throw me over a table and I'm going to be incapacitated and we're going to move Nigel. And also, I was begging them, we got to do something big for WrestleMania weekend in New York 2013. Now's the time, let's bring in the Japanese talent. I had wanted to bring in the Japanese talent because that's tailor-made not only for the old Ring of Honor audience, but also for if you're selling an athletic, credible pro wrestling style and form, the Japanese are tremendous at it. So I'd wanted, but the cost is ridiculous. Because the big time Japanese talent won't come without proper work papers, which is the major part of the cost. Not only you have to buy a plane ticket from Japan and pay a top star, but also the work papers, for some reason, is as much more than the plane ticket and the payoff. It's fucking ridiculous. So I was presenting this. I said, now is the time, because with pay-per-view, with DVD sales, with the Live Gate in New York and everybody running wrestling in WrestleMania weekend in New York, we're going to need all the help we can get. And the office boy's going, well, I won't concede that we can't sell out on our own, and I'm not going to attribute any live event revenue to this Japanese Kobashi and blah, blah, blah. And it said, and Kenta or whatever. And I'm like, I stood up and leaned over the table. I said, I know what I'm fucking talking about, because he'd never even heard of Japanese wrestling for 18 months beforehand. He'd never seen this guy that we're talking about. He's telling us that we know, that he knows that better than we do, that he won't fucking draw the money it's going to cost. Anyway, of course, we ended up not getting them.